Trump, a young man who had spent most of his life in the shadows of public attention, sat quietly at his seat. As always, he tried to blend in, avoiding the overwhelming glare of the media. The crowded room buzzed with the usual excitement of a political event. Cameras. Then, from the corner of the room, a prominent liberal journalist stood up. His voice, sharp and cutting, echoed across the hall. Flashed, and reporters scurried to capture every moment. In the midst of it all, Barron. It must be hard to live in the shadow of your father, knowing that your future was paved for you long before you had a chance to carve your own path, he sneered. Laughter erupted from a small group of onlookers. The journalist's words, meant to sting, seemed to hit their mark as the crowd chuckled. Barron's face remained neutral, but the sting of the words was there, though his composure didn't betray it. Barron's words hung in the air, sharp, yet composed, like the calm before a storm. There was something almost palpable about the way he spoke. Steady, measured, as if every word carried the weight of years of thought. The audience remained frozen, processing what had just been said. The journalist, who had been quick to criticize Barron's privileged background, blinked as if he couldn't quite process the shift. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came. He had expected Barron to stutter, to flinch, to react defensively. Instead, Barron had laid bare the simplicity of his stance with nothing more than a few sentences. Barron didn't look at him with contempt or malice. There was only a quiet understanding in his gaze, as though he pitied the journalist for not seeing the truth. He wasn't the person they thought him to be. Not a puppet, not an heir to a legacy of wealth, but an individual in his own right. His posture remained calm, his arms resting lightly at his sides, betraying no sign of the fire that had been sparked in the hearts of those watching. Slowly, Barron turned his gaze to the crowd, his eyes meeting those of the people around him. It was as if, in that one moment, he had shed the armor of his family name and stood purely as himself, unburdened by expectation. The tension in the room, thick as a storm cloud, seemed to dissipate. It wasn't a fight Barron had to win with words. He had simply spoken his truth, and the truth, more often than not, was enough. The silence was broken by a soft, hesitant clapping from the back of the room. A few others joined in, and soon the whole audience was applauding, their initial skepticism replaced with respect. Barron's ability to stand firm in the face of mockery was enough to earn their admiration. And the journalist? He stood there for a few moments, still stunned, his usual smugness now nowhere to be found. Finally, he took a step back, his face flushed with embarrassment, realizing he had underestimated Barron in the worst way possible. Barron didn't gloat. Instead, he simply nodded once, his expression still calm. He had made his point, and he had made it without raising his voice. As he sat back down, there was a subtle shift in the room. The atmosphere had changed. Barron had proven something far more valuable than his ability to silence his critics. He had proven that character wasn't defined by blood or fortune. It was something deeper, something that couldn't be mocked away. The journalist knew he had been defeated, not by Barron's wealth nor by his lineage, but by his unwavering sense of self. And as Barron sat there, composed and unshaken, it was clear to everyone in that room. This young man wasn't just living a life written for him. He was writing his own story, and he would do it on his own terms. The social media buzz was immediate. Clips of Barron's calm retort went viral, flooding timelines with hashtags like Barron Speaks and Own Your Truth. Some users hailed him as a symbol of grace under pressure, while others were still trying to process the sheer composure he had displayed in the face of public scrutiny. The debate raged across forums, with some questioning whether Barron had truly earned the right to speak with such authority, considering his inherited wealth, while others defended him, acknowledging that the true measure of a person was how they responded to adversity. But no matter the side of the debate, One thing was certain: Barron had undeniably captured the public's attention. At the event, the atmosphere had softened. The crowd, now more subdued, seemed to regard Barron with new respect. His words had cut through the noise, and there was a shared understanding in the room that they had witnessed something rare. The tension that had once defined the space had been replaced by a quiet admiration. Barron, for his part, remained unfazed. He sat in his seat with the same quiet demeanor, a slight smile on his face as he observed the subtle shift in the room. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, as though he was aware of the gravity of the moment without letting it weigh on him. The panel resumed, though the energy was different. Conversations had already begun to revolve around Barron's response, with even the host subtly acknowledging the power of his words. "Well," the host said, trying to regain control of the conversation, "I think it's safe to say that Barron's got a pretty strong sense of who he is. Let's move forward, shall we?" But the journalist, who had previously been so confident, struggled to rejoin the discussion. He cleared his throat, his earlier jeering tone replaced with a note of hesitance. "Yes, of course," he stammered, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of Barron's calm yet searing retort. And so the interview continued, but something had irrevocably shifted. Barron's silence in the face of ridicule had said more than words could express. It had shown not just strength, but wisdom. Wisdom that went beyond his name or his wealth. Back outside the event, Barron's response had sparked a wider conversation. People were eager to dissect the underlying message, to see if there was more to him than the image that had been painted by the media. Some wondered if this was the beginning of Barron's journey into public life, or if he would continue to step out of the spotlight, content with the life his family had set out for him. But Barron had already made it clear he would walk his own path no matter the expectations and no matter the critics. His calm strength had not only quieted the room that night, it had ignited a conversation that would linger long after. The event ended. Barron's words echoed beyond the room, becoming a reminder to those who heard it. Our paths may be shaped by those before us, but it is up to us to decide how we walk them. The immediate silence that followed Barron's words seemed to stretch for an eternity. For a brief moment, the journalist looked around, clearly unsure of how to respond to the unexpected turn of events. The air in the room was heavy with an uncomfortable tension. Some of the onlookers, initially amused by the journalist's bold remark, now exchanged nervous glances. Barron, however, sat back down in his chair with a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh. He wasn't angry, he wasn't upset, he was simply unfazed. The years of public scrutiny had taught him that silence often spoke louder than words. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The power of his response had been in its calm, its dignity. Across the room, the journalist adjusted his glasses, his confidence shattered. His face reddened, and for the first time, he seemed uncertain about the consequences of his actions. His usual sharp tongue had failed him in a way that no one, including himself, had anticipated. Backstage, away from the prying eyes of the media, the journalist was pacing furiously. He couldn't shake the feeling of having been bested, of having lost control of the narrative. His colleagues tried to comfort him, but their words felt hollow in the face of his humiliation. He had underestimated Barron, and it was a mistake he wouldn't soon forget. Meanwhile, Barron was having a quiet moment of reflection. Sitting alone in a private room, he looked out the window, his thoughts heavy. He had faced criticism and mockery for most of his life, but this time felt different. For the first time, his words had cut through the noise, and the world was listening. It was both a powerful and sobering realization. He wasn't just the child of a famous figure. He had his own voice, his own identity, and with that came a responsibility he wasn't sure he was ready for. As he sat in that room, Barron felt a surge of both pride and pressure. He wasn't just a symbol of his father anymore. He was a person in his own right. The weight of that truth settled on his shoulders. The day after the incident, social media exploded with reactions. Some hailed Barron's response as a sign of his maturity, while others criticized him for not defending his family more aggressively. However, one thing was clear. Everyone had an opinion. News outlets reported the event with various angles, but the central theme was the same. Barron Trump had made an impact. For Barron, the public attention was overwhelming. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the barrage of opinions, both positive and negative, left him exhausted. But beneath it all, there was a sense of empowerment. His words had proven that he could control the narrative, even if just for a moment. As the media frenzy continued, Barron stayed quiet, refusing to engage with the noise. He had made his statement, and he knew that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. Weeks later, Barron sat in a quiet park, away from the frenzy of the media and the expectations of others. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the scene. He thought back to that day, the mocking journalist, and his own calm response. In that moment, something clicked inside him. The world would always have something to say about him, whether it was his father's influence or his own actions, but it didn't have to define him. Barron realized that the silence he had embraced wasn't just a way to avoid conflict, it was a form of strength. By choosing not to react impulsively, he had controlled the situation entirely. It wasn't about winning the argument or getting the last word. It was about understanding the power of composure and self-assurance. With a deep breath, Barron smiled to himself. The world may have its opinions, but at the end of the day, he would walk his own path, unbothered by the noise around him. Wow, what a journey this story has been. Barron Trump's calm response to public mockery didn't just silence a room, it sparked a deeper reflection on the power of words and the importance of self-assurance. In a world filled with noise, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stay silent and let our actions speak for us. What do you think about Barron's response? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge the way we think. See you next time.